Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell is out this week, but we are joined by Ant Pruitt. Ant and I talk with Rene Ritchie of youtube.com/Rene Ritchie about YouTube. Yes, you guessed it. It's YouTube Shorts. It's the TikTok of YouTube. Yeah, we'll go with that. We also talked to Paris Martineau of The Information about an interesting program at Amazon. Amazon is expanding upon this program, which gamifies warehouse work. Workers can earn virtual coins and virtual points that they can use to keep their little virtual pets alive. All very fascinating. We also have a really in-depth story of the week about a Vice article related to an SMS hack where paying $16 gets you all of a person's text messages. It's pretty troubling. And round things out with Ant Pruitt's story of the week. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 175, recorded Thursday, March 18th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Uber for Business. Right now, for a limited time, receive a $50 voucher when you create your first vouchers campaign and spend $200. Go to uber.com/TNW to learn more.
And by IT Pro TV. Expand your skills or launch yourself into a career with IT. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscriptions. Use code TNW30 at checkout.
And by Conga. Experience Conga's new brand and have some fun by testing your trivia knowledge. They'll be donating to a charity that supports COVID relief efforts. Go to conga.com/twit today.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show every week where we sit down and talk about all the folks making and breaking the tech news. I am Ant Pruitt.
And I am Mikah Sargent. And yes, as you can see, we have Ant Pruitt joining us today. Round of applause to Jason Howell, who received his first shot vaccine. And so he, unfortunately, but also fortunately, because it means his immune system is working as it's meant to, is a little under the weather. But I am happy to say that Ant Pruitt stepped in to save the day. And we are happy to have you here, Ant.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. And again, kudos to Mr. Howell. That is issues with this vaccine just doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And it wasn't that bad coffee that he had yesterday. Wink, wink. check his Twitter feed.
Oh, lovely. Folks, we do have quite an episode ahead, and I am excited to start things off. It's going to be a familiar face, but perhaps not so familiar a topic or one that you might expect. So, you've got TikTok, you've got Instagram stories, you've got Instagram Lite in India, and all of these different kinds of services that are looking at ways to offer short form video and video done in a new creative way. And all of that boils down to a new feature that is in beta and being rolled out kind of in the United States to take on TikTok in theory. And it is called YouTube Shorts. And it turns out that I recently saw someone talking about YouTube Shorts. And that very person is here to join us today. It's Rene Ritchie. Welcome back, Rene.
Hey, Micah. So good to be here. Yeah, I've become I don't know if it's as focused on the back end of YouTube as I have been on Apple, but I find it endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found interesting in following you and seeing your response to some of these different things that have happened is just understanding YouTube and how it relates to other media platforms. And I remember you talking recently about the way that, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong or kind of elaborate here, but it was kind of the way that YouTube seems to be more drawn to directly being of interest to the audience. Like the algorithm is created for interest and entertainment as opposed to just doing things for the Google search terms. Could you talk a little bit about that before we actually get into YouTube Shorts specifically?
Yeah, for sure. And like you and I worked together at iMore for years, and like each day, every day, we were pummeled with Google SEO. And if Google changed an algorithm, we could lose massive amounts of page views. If they changed the presentation on their snippets, we could lose or gain massive amounts of page views. And it was really stressful. Like I want to send Daniel Bader a glass of scotch like every day because of what he still goes through. But for YouTube, it's different because almost all the time, even if you're not watching on platform, you're watching through a YouTube embed. So they have almost perfect data. It's not like they're sending you to a web page and then trying to figure out what happened later. So they started off with click-through rate. They found out that was too easy to do clickbait for. So they moved to retention, which is how much of a video you watched, because that to them was like, you didn't just click into it, you actually watched enough of it that we think it's a good video. But then they found out that people watched like conspiracy and extremism stuff, and it wasn't stuff that made them feel good. It was just stuff that sucked them in. And so now they're doing a lot of audience metrics. Like they'll ask you how you felt at the end of a video, trying to make sure that it was actually a good experience for you. Because ultimately they want you to stay on YouTube as long as possible. That's their real goal. But their goal becomes the more and more they can align that goal with the audience, the better everybody will do, which is why I don't worry at all about YouTube SEO or algorithms or anything anymore.
Well, and that's kind of nice is maybe perhaps a little bit more freedom or a difference of trying to focus on the audience. And one of the ways that I think YouTube itself is attempting to focus on the audience is by looking at the success of TikTok and similar platforms that are offering shorter form video in creative ways. And so it is working on something called YouTube Shorts. Could you talk a little bit about what YouTube Shorts is? And then we'll get into kind of your experience creating YouTube Shorts before we talk a little bit more about the tools that are available.
Sure, absolutely. And you sort of have to differentiate between what's the platform and what's the feature. Like you mentioned previously, Snapchat it was really addictive for a while, but then Instagram got stories and YouTube got stories, and now even Slack has stories. It became very clear that was a feature, not really a product. And then TikTok came around and they really changed up the video game, because instead of trying to be another YouTube, they focused on under 1 minute videos. There's not even a thumbnail. You just scroll through an endless timeline, and they algorithmically try to give you videos that'll keep you scrolling through that timeline. And that started to draw a lot of attention. So in the same way that everyone started copying stories, everyone started copying TikToks, and Instagram got Reels, and now YouTube has Shorts. It started off with a dedicated app in India where you could make up to 15-second videos, but they had a sort of loose beta around the world. You had to put hashtag Shorts in the title and or the description. They can be under 1 minute in length. They have to be vertical. And then they created this thing called the short shelf, which exists only on mobile. And it's got a separate algorithm to try to figure out how to serve this very TikTok experience and wedge it into YouTube at the same time.
Interesting, especially the short shelf. Now, why was it sort of, if you have any insight into this, why was it a little bit, because what you were talking about, I remember you specifically talking about shorts and having to have certain things in the title, and that kind of made them specific. Was the idea that it was just very experimental? Was it that some creators were aware of it and others were not? I mean, how did you know about YouTube Shorts? How did you know that this was what you needed to do to make this happen and to be able to make it available to you? Did YouTube let you know? Was there a conference about it? How did that work?
Yeah, so I think the reason they rolled it out the way they could is they had to choose. We could either put out something now as sort of a patchwork application, like just the best that we could possibly do, like real beta, hard beta, or we could wait a few months and make something more polished. And they chose to put it out early so they could get as much data. Like YouTube, you have to feed these machine learning algorithms. You have to give them a lot of content to work against, both to start identifying what people like and how to serve it. And they just wanted to start getting the data as fast as they can. And they put out that app in India. So in India, I think it was really easy to get started. Everywhere else, there were support articles that went up that detailed the process, and then people started talking about them. And as usual, you get like all the conspiracy, it's not really a conspiracy theory, but because there were so few shorts and because they were in the mobile app, people who uploaded shorts early saw tremendous amounts of traffic. It's still nebulous what you can do with that because shorts aren't monetized on the short shelf, but they just saw like millions of views and hundreds of thousands, not millions of new subscribers. So once word of that got out, just the word of mouth marketing on it was enormous, and everyone sort of wanted to jack into this OP, totally overpowered due to the algorithm.
Mr. Ritchie, I swear, some days I feel like a Luddite because I look at Snapchat, I look at TikTok, I look at Instagram Reels, I look at Instagram Stories, and most of it just confuses the crap out of me. I assume that it's because I'm an old guy with balding and gray hair and all of that stuff. I just don't quite get it. My question is, what are the demographics on this? Is this something geared more towards the younger folks, or is it for anybody, everybody? You start talking about conspiracy theories, I'm assuming that's not necessarily the teenagers posting that stuff. How did YouTube decide, you know what, this is worth our while to go ahead and create a product like this and target this demographic versus targeting that demographic?
So, I mean, it sounds trite, but we really are what we click on. And a lot of times we complain about content, but we still click on that content. And I think YouTube, I think TikTok saw that there was a market for really highly snackable video. Like Vine tried, but Twitter really dropped the ball on Vine early on. And then ByteDance picked it up. It was Musical.ly, and then they turned it into TikTok, and they saw massive attachment. And I think there are people who there was a market for really short form video, the same way Twitter showed there was a market for microblogging. We just wanted to put out a little bit of text. We want to scroll through a timeline. Or doom scroll through a timeline, as the case may be. And we want to see what jumps out at us. And yes, it is the worst. It is like filled with booty shakes and all sorts of weird stuff on one hand, but it's also filled with like a lot of sketch comedy. Alex Lindsay does them like full on ILM productions, like with green screens and CGI. So you get the whole gamut, and the algorithm just wants to try to feed you more of what you either stop and watch, or even just, I think they even like monitor when you slow down on something. And you're like, why am I getting more of these gadgets? Like, because you slowed down when you were scrolling over those gadgets.
Right.
Absolutely. That I think about that on Instagram a lot. I pay attention to my scroll because I have noticed that, yes, if I stop too long on something, then the algorithm goes, oh, I think that might be of interest. And it's yes. Particularly with ads, I'll start to get like 9 or 10 ads from the same company for the ad that I accidentally or purposely in some cases slowed down on. So they really do pay attention. And I think that, that plays a role in trying. And one thing that I'm interested about in particular is a trend that I've seen lately, and maybe it's always been there, but it's not been as blatant. It really feels, I feel like Instagram was the first company to do this shamelessly, and then others followed, which was seeing another company in this space make a feature and then doing that same thing, almost exactly the same, but for that platform, and then just kind of doing it shamelessly and saying, okay, this is what we're done. I can remember Instagram's, I think, founder at the time, or founder and CEO at the time, I don't quite recall, but there was an interview where they had launched Instagram stories, and they were like, yeah, we took that from Snapchat. It's a great feature. We want it here on the platform. And from that point on, it almost opened up, it seemed, a trend of folks just very blatantly saying people like that on that platform, they might like it on ours. And so I was wondering if you could speak to the idea of just having the features or the functionality in your own social network that you choose to use and being able to have it there, because sometimes people get a little complainy about it, but it does seem like that's, that it's worthwhile to on Twitter add stories for the people who just want to post stories to Twitter, for example. Do you feel that, or do you feel like it's sometimes a mistake for companies to try to pull those features from other services?
I think it's both. It goes back to that old story about Steve Jobs when he met with Dropbox, about buying them. And he's like, you're not a product, you're a feature. And in some ways, people joke that he should have got Dropbox because iCloud has never been any good. But, Google Drive does that, and OneDrive or SkyDrive, whatever Microsoft's calling their drive right now, does that. And it becomes a feature to everybody. And I think stories, to your point, is exactly that. I was joking, but Slack really does integrate stories. It just became everywhere. And it's hard to tell if that hurt Snapchat or if the Kardashian clan leaving Snapchat hurt them. All those things are hard. For me, sometimes you want a dedicated platform because you want an integrated, consistent experience. Like right now, after the latest InDesign, Instagram is hard to navigate. Like if you just want to add something to Instagram, you press the plus button, you've got 8 different options. And Twitter is trying to put not just stories into their mobile app, but now their copy of Clubhouse, which is called Spaces as well. And it's got this big throbbing bar between two people's heads that look really inappropriate most of the time. And it just becomes a lot to mentally parse. Like, what is this app trying to do? You're just cramming everything in here like a junk drawer. And maybe that works because some people just want it there. And maybe you still have the Snapchats and the Clubhouse providing a better experience. I know on YouTube, Shorts are a mixed blessing right now because if you put them in your main channel, people hit them and they're like, why is the video vertical? Or I don't understand this. Or they get put up in browse. And then some people are upset because you can't really monetize them. So are they taking clicks away from your main content? And it creates all of these unknowns. And then maybe people start a second channel just for clips, but now you have the overhead of managing 2 channels. And it just seems like digital companies, big tech, can create these little digital gardens for us way faster than we can tend to them. And they just keep adding more gardens. And we have to figure out which gardens to abandon behind us. And where are our friends? Where's the money? Where is all these things? And it just becomes a lot of overhead, Micah.
Yeah, it really does. And that just makes me feel exhausted. The last question I'll have for you is, if you had to put an estimate on it, well, first of all, I guess, prediction of, is YouTube Shorts going to become a feature that everyone will eventually have access to? And if so, any idea of when this rollout goes from beta to full on use for everybody?
Yeah, I think everybody can access it now using the hashtag Shorts hack. Like if you're willing to put hashtag Shorts in your title and or your description, you can have access to it now, provided you're doing 15 seconds vertical video under 1 minute vertical video and that hashtag. And they're already seeing good numbers. Like I think their numbers for it, because YouTube is so big, are already close to, if not, slightly ahead of TikTok's already. But they still have a lot of things they have to do. Like you can decide whether you want to push them to your subscribers or not, but you can't choose whether they're in browse or in recommend, like whether they're in recommended or suggested or not. And there's no Shorts tab. They have a community tab, so posts don't get plastered in between your videos. But if you put up 1 short a day, but only 1 video a week, your video tab just looks like it's littered with shorts at this point. So it's not ideal yet. And I figure they got to do a lot of cleanup before it goes out of beta.
Makes sense. Well, Rene, Ritchie, thank you, of course, for joining us today. If folks want to check out your shorts, where do they go to do that and to follow you online?
Well, I'm wearing my shorts every week on MacBreak Weekly. But if you want to see the video shorts, you can see that at youtube.com/Rene Ritchie.
Excellent, Rene, Ritchie. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you, Ant.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All righty. Up next, Amazon gamifies warehouse work. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Uber for Business. It can be hard to find simple and effective ways to keep employees engaged and to keep customers happy. It's especially challenging in our circumstances where face-to-face interaction is limited. If you're trying to find a way to stand out to your customers or make your employees feel extra valued, you should check out Uber for Business. It's exactly what your business needs. You already trust Uber as a way to request rides and to order meals from restaurants you love. But did you know about Uber's platform designed specifically for businesses? More than 150,000 companies, use Uber for Business to improve customer and employee satisfaction. Are you having a hard time getting people to show up or to stay engaged in virtual team meetings or events? Well, you can use vouchers, this is from Uber for Business, to add $20 to their personal Uber accounts so they can easily order meals through Uber Eats before the meeting. So think about that. You've got an upcoming video call and it's an all hands meeting, and folks tend to, not tune in or are doing other things or aren't able to make it. And you could, you've got dinner or something like that. Well, how about we'll pay for your dinner, we'll buy your dinner, and you come to this all hands meeting. It's a really clever way to do that. And what about customers? You want to make them love your business even more? Well, offer them a voucher for a free meal or ride when they make their first purchase or spend a certain amount. Any company can sign up for free and immediately start delivering extra value to the people who matter most to their business. Vouchers are simple to send and to redeem. Your business has total control over who gets them, when they expire, and what portion of the ride or meal you want to cover. Vouchers are shared via email or text, so they can be redeemed with a single tap. And best of all, you only pay for rides they take or meals they order. I was just thinking, like a dentist's office. There are some times where you have procedures where you're not able to drive home, and maybe the person is unable to find a ride home. Well, you could offer them a voucher so that an Uber could come and pick them up and take them where they needed to go. There are loads of different situations where these might work for you. Right now, for a limited time, you can receive a $50 voucher when you create your first vouchers campaign and spend $200. Go to uber.com/TNW to learn more. That's uber.com/TNW. Uber.com/TNW. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks so much to Uber for Business for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Ant, take it away.
All right. So, of course, Amazon being the big, bad tech giant that they are, they're going to always be in the tech news. It is what it is. Whether it's dealing with the pandemic and taking away from small businesses, or actually giving people more opportunity to do deliveries and things of that nature. Well, recently, Amazon has decided to expand upon its gamification idea for our warehouse employees. And today we have Ms. Paris Martineau joining us to talk more about this story, or more about this issue. Hello, Paris, you there?
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, this is something that is quite polarizing. Personally, I see it on both ends of the spectrum, but what exactly is happening here with this gamification of the different tasks happening for all of the warehouse employees there at Amazon?
Yeah, so my reporting kind of uncovered that in Amazon warehouses in at least 20 states around the U.S., some Amazon workers, specifically the pickers and sorters in the warehouses, some aspects of their jobs now have these gamification screens installed in them. And what that means is, instead of kind of going about your day having to take stuff off robotic shelves and put it in a robotic kind of tread or kind of sort thing, what you end up doing is you do that exact same part of your job, but depending on how fast you work or how well you complete certain tasks, you can earn points on a kind of video game arcade screen installed in your workstation. And those points can be used to play one of 6 games, which all kind of have a retro arcade feel. One of them seems like Tamagotchi. It's called Tamazilla, and you can spend points to buy virtual pets like narwhals or sparkly dragons, and then spend points accrued by your labor to like raise them and whatnot. Or in the other ones, you can compete against your fellow warehouse workers to race a car around the track, but how fast you go is dependent on how quickly you do your job. So it raises kind of a lot of questionable issues because, one, this is making workers, I guess, days more enjoyable. That's why Amazon's doing it. But it also is kind of encouraging them to go faster, work harder for imaginary internet points.
Okay, with that said, bottom line right here, is this actually working for Amazon? Is Amazon seeing any type of efficiency increase with this gamification, or is it just another way for them to collect data to figure out how they can motivate their employees?
So it's kind of a complicated answer. Amazon started testing this program. It's called FC Games, originally in one warehouse in 2017, and has since expanded it out to warehouses all across the country. Amazon didn't tell me specifically whether or not that change was motivated by increased efficiency, but Amazon rarely does anything that decreases worker efficiency. It did say that this seemed to motivate workers and they seemed to enjoy it, which was what prompted them to roll it out. But this is also the same company that tracks every single thing that all these workers do. And if you don't perhaps pick and stow objects at the pace they want, you'll get fired. So,
right. Now, with this gamification in place, is this a requirement for the warehouse workers, or do they have a choice?
They have a choice, and that's what Amazon says. It's just an extra screen kind of attached to their workstation. They can choose to play it if they want to. Some workers that I spoke to said they kind of feel pressure from maybe their boss or manager to specifically play the games as a way to kind of track your progress, but that may just be an anecdotal evidence from one or two people. Overall, it seems to, in my opinion, kind of just be one new addition to Amazon's overall kind of encroachment into every aspect of these workers' lives.
When I see stories like this, I try to put myself in the shoes of a warehouse worker, because a lot of people will come at me and tell me I have all of this privilege for being able to do what I do for a living. And it's not quite the same as working in a warehouse for 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. But I can go ahead and tell you, I have worked in those types of situations before. And in my experience, there were times where I'm thinking, okay, I'm sitting here making this widget for 12 hours, and the process of making the widget was hitting one button over and over and over and over. And 12 hours doing that is a long time. And I could see where someone would want to, spice up that shift a little bit to keep them from falling asleep, because you're probably going to slow down just from being bored doing the same repetitive task over and over again. Then there's the other side of the coin where you take a retail store, because I've also worked in retail. Some retailers will have some sort of gamification with spiffs and things like that. You need to upsell this item to get an additional bonus. And what's happening there is management is saying, hey, we need to pick up the production on this particular item because we got so many of them, we need to make our money back. But you don't hear any of the retailers catching the flack that Amazon is catching for doing pretty much the same type of practice here with this gamification. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of a gamification in its many forms is used in a lot of different industries. I think the main difference here is that Amazon's warehouses, according to research from the National Employment Labor Institute, I believe, and the Seattle Times, it's found that Amazon's warehouses have a really high rate of injury for warehouses and also extremely high turnover, which kind of suggests that workers are maybe being put in dangerous or unsafe situations more often than they should. And some of the warehouse workers that I spoke with said that while the games were better than nothing at all, they and some of their colleagues would prefer to not have them in some cases because it would inadvertently incentivize them to work faster, which is also how you get hurt in these sort of situations. And they'd prefer, I don't know, if it's talking about their enjoyment, being able to listen to a podcast or listen to music or do something that isn't explicitly tied to their productivity. But, I mean, as you said, it's kind of two sides of a coin.
The one, more of a question, or more of a clarification rather than a question, just to make sure, because I saw some early responses to this, and they led to misunderstanding, I believe, about this program. And so I want to ask, because there were comparisons drawn to the company store, which was this idea that what you worked for a company, and instead of earning money, or instead of entirely earning money, you would earn money and sort of a token that you would add those up, and then you would be able to buy things at the company store with the token. And that, of course, led to all sorts of trouble with this with these games. and the points that you earn. This is all entirely virtual, all entirely related to the game and keeping the character alive. And these are not points that can be redeemed for actual objects or actual benefits in real life, correct?
Yeah, so FC Games, which is the name of the platform, is kind of self-contained, involves its own virtual currency. There's another Amazon program that isn't part of FC Games, but kind of is tracked using the same metrics, where Amazon will reward employees during peak periods or periods where they need higher production. They'll reward employees for meeting specific production goals with something called eSwag, which is kind of like what you're talking about, where you can have 45 eSwag points and get a Amazon branded snapback or something like that at the company store.
So there is real trade-in.
There is, okay. But that's a different program, and that's yeah. Interesting. Okay. That was my only question, because for me, I think that sort of idea is what takes things to an even more oily place. But yeah, what certainly. You said, the incentivization, we'll go with that. Being incentivized to work harder, faster, et cetera, and resulting in injuries and things like that. And particularly, I mean, was there any discussion or conversation about these types of games in relation to the global pandemic, where folks may be more apt to make dangerous choices because of the gaming and not necessarily be as safe or as smart about the requirements put in place for the pandemic? So I didn't specifically speak to Amazon about the pandemic, but from what we can tell, a large part of this rollout has happened within the last year, which of course has coincided with the pandemic, when Amazon's notoriously high turnover has been even higher due to health concerns. I think it's also worth mentioning that from what we've been able to tell, it seems like the gaming platform is only being installed in fulfillment centers that have robotics, which are kind of the fulfillment centers where warehouse workers, you essentially just stand in one location and robots will bring a bunch of stuff to you back and forth, and you just have to pick stuff from a shelf and put it in a basket. But these robotics-enabled fulfillment centers are also a investigation a year or two ago from Reveal found that, according to Amazon's own internal safety documents, robotics fulfillment centers experience a much higher injury rate than other fulfillment centers because robots often get in the way of workers and vice versa.
Robots are robots, right?
They are robots, unfortunately. Or fortunately.
Unbelievable. Well, this has been an interesting discussion. I'm sort of on both sides of the fence, because Amazon has a job to do, because there are paying customers that are paying for the Amazon services. But at the same time, you do need to honor and respect workers' rights and make sure the people working there are being taken care of. So it's a really, really touchy subject. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Ms. Paris, thank you so much for joining us this week. Where can others find more of your work and things that you're working on?
So I write for The Information. You can read our stuff there, as well as follow me on Twitter at Paris Martineau.
All right. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate you joining us this week.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. Up next, we have Mr. Mikah's Story of the Week. But first, we need to thank another great sponsor, the folks at IT Pro TV. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. There is no shortage of online platforms that enables users to brush up on their IT skills or learn new ones. And with 7 studios, as well as a fun and entertaining edutainers, IT Pro TV is the best online IT training platform. One of the most important aspects of IT is cybersecurity. Businesses can be vulnerable and need strong IT leadership to combat threats so that businesses can set themselves up for success. The best way for businesses to achieve this is by keeping up with the industry trends and strengthening skills of IT leadership. The IT Pro TV business platform has been developed from the ground up to support online IT training for both IT leaders and employees. You can access over 5,800 hours of engaging video training online and on demand. It offers courses on malware detection, cryptography, penetration testing, and end-user security awareness, and a lot more, folks. Individuals can also launch and advance their careers in the cybersecurity realm. IT Pro TV is the only official video training partner for CompTIA, so you know you're in the right place for getting the right certifications. Now, March is Cisco month at IT Pro TV. They'll be featuring 12 different Cisco courses, including CCNA, CCNP, CCT, Encore, SLED, and NRC. Check out their webinar with Cisco Award winner David Bombell. It's called Get Hands-On with Cisco, and it's available now on demand at itpro.tv/webinars. For more insight about IT, check out their podcast, Technado, with host Don Pizzette, featuring industry guests and IT news recaps for a deeper dive into the IT realm. IT Pro TV is also helping communities. Now, this is big. Last year, they served over 30 COVID-impacted educational institutions with free training. And kudos. With over 225,000 members, you know they'll have the knowledge and support you need to further their IT career. So go to itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 for additional 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV. Build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey.
Alrighty, folks. There was a very important story that happened this week, and unfortunately, due to some scheduling issues, we weren't able to get the author of the piece on. But I could not let it go without talking about it. It was so wild coming on early in the week that I saw it, and I ended up immediately going, okay, this is definitely a Tech News Weekly story. This was over on Vice's Motherboard publication by Joseph Cox, who we've had on the show in the past. And Joseph wrote a story about a way to take advantage of a flaw in SMS, the short message service, which is how most text messaging has worked in the past and continues to work for many folks. Those of us on iPhones, it's a little bit different. But because of this, hackers are able to take over phone numbers in mere minutes and do it in a way that's incredibly simple. The person who wrote this piece, Joseph Cox, he wrote it kind of starting out as a bit of an editorial with a really interesting story about how it was just talking with a colleague, and then suddenly he got screenshots from this hacker who had shown that a few of his accounts had been broken into. And then he got text messages he did not receive text messages. He had screenshots from the hacker who showed text messages that were supposed to be for Joseph Cox sent to the hacker instead. And typically, if we could cut back to me really quick, because I want to talk about the process here. There are multiple ways to go about doing kind of message-based hacking. And one of those is it involves kind of a social hacking technique where either you bribe or you work out a way to trick an employee who works for the person's cell carrier in order to get the number that's tied to the person's SIM card that's, either placed into the phone or is digitally part of the phone, transferred to the SIM card that you have, that you want to use. And with that process, there's a way to immediately tell that there's something going wrong. So if if Ant calls up AT&T and says, hey, and then does this very magical thing where somehow he convinces the person on the other side that this is legit and gets my number put onto his SIM card, then when I look at my phone, my signal is going to be gone. I can very easily tell that something has gone wrong, that, I no longer have access to my phone number. But that's what makes this new flaw so insidious and so brilliant, because other than the fact that you're not receiving text messages, you wouldn't be able to tell that someone had done something wrong with your number. So I want to kind of go into some of the details here. It's not SIM swapping. It uses a system to reroute SMS messages through a company that is that is intended to be a way for businesses to set up text messaging with their company. So, for example, maybe you have a phone number that you've always had, and you've got some stupid jingle that's been in commercials for years, and so everybody knows you call 877 cash now to get a hold of the.
Hold on, what was that number again?
877 cash now. You know that one. And so with that number, you may want to make it so that people can text it as well. And so these services let you do that. They basically they enable you to turn a number that you already have that's kind of set up through a different system into a number that can receive text messages. It also is for kind of SMS reminder services. So you may have, say, you buy a product and there's tracking information involved. And so you type in your number, and then the company texts you to let you know how long it takes for the package to get there, or a dentist's office that texts you to remind you that you need to go in for your cleaning. I get it. I know I need to go in for my cleaning. Anyway, so with that, there are all of these different systems in place, and it's kind of wild that this has not really been put out there before, that the people have not been made aware of this, because it's something that's been around for a while. It's just that the nefarious use of it is something that folks weren't necessarily aware of. So this is kind of the process. They went to this site called Sakari, and with a prepaid card, they spent $16 for the $16 a month plan. And then all they did was they took Joseph Cox's phone number and they put it into the system, and they filled out what's called a letter of authorization form, which is a form that basically says, I am who I say I am, or I have permission from the person who owns this phone number to use this phone number for this purpose. They just put some fake info into the letter of authorization form, and then got approved to be able to reroute the text messages that were being sent to Joseph Cox's phone number. And using that, they gained access to the writer's Bumble, their WhatsApp account, which that's a big one. WhatsApp is a service that a lot of people use to communicate, and their Postmates account. And all it took was $16. The good news here is that Joseph Cox was working with this hacker to do this. And so it wasn't a surprise to him, and the hacker wasn't nefarious in doing it. It was just showing that it was possible so that it could be written about. But imagine, I don't know about you, Ann, but this makes me all the more cautious about ever letting my phone number be shown on our shows that we do, right? Yeah, ever. Because, yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts about this? Did you know that this kind of system was out there? Because all I knew about was SIM jacking, right?
That's all I knew about was the SIM jacking, and seeing this story previously on This Week in Google, wink, wink, show plug. We talked about this, and my question was, now that this is going on, well, actually, it's a couple questions. First, what's happening to this Sakari company now that they've been outed, if you will? Are they going to be responsible for tightening up their process and procedures for these approvals? Because it sounds like it could be a legitimate purpose, but if you're not doing any type of verification other than just filling out a random form, that's not cool. Then the next question is, take a look at the companies, the carriers such as AT&T, Verizon, or what have you. What kind of training is going on with their staff, their customer service team, that can go through and help limit stuff like this from happening. Because right now, a lot of those customer service representatives are working from home remotely. So we already know there's a different level of stress right there between making sure they're getting their job done throughout the day and keeping the bosses happy, as well as making sure the house isn't on fire because kids are running around, dogs are chewing on things behind them and things like that. So there's a little bit of added stress there. So things can start to slip when it comes to productivity. So I wonder what's happening between both of those parties there and to help stop stuff like this from happening, because this is pretty daggum serious.
Yeah, incredibly serious. And in the piece, Cox notes it was a few minutes. It took a few minutes after Lucky 225 is the pseudonym for the hacker, and so Lucky 225 entered Cox's T-Mobile number into Sakari and then started receiving text messages. And there was no call, there was no text notification that let Cox know that this service was going to start being used. He just stopped getting texts. And what's interesting too is that Motherboard set up an account with Sakari to verify that the site was real and that it really did do this kind of thing. And they reached out to Sakari for a comment, and then Sakari suspended their account on the service. So, I mean, to me, this just is like, are we just burying this? That this is a problem, that this exists, and that's wild to me. That's kind of terrifying to me, especially because you don't know what you don't know, and in this case, you wouldn't know that this is going wrong, other than my mom, I guess, emailing me to be like, are you not getting my text messages? And then me going, what do you mean? And then suddenly I would be more aware. Of course, that is where I think there is some benefit to services like iMessage, which are routed through Apple's own system. So as opposed to being over the SMS or MMS systems, it's just a data packet that's sent and delivered that way. So with my mom, that would not be the case. But if, Aunt, you tried to text me and someone had taken my message or had taken my phone number, then I would not get that and I would not know. If Jason, who let me know, that he was unwell, had tried to text me this morning and this had happened, I wouldn't know that you would have been filling in for him for Tech News Weekly through text messaging.
Now there's something even bigger with this though. Let's say that you were logging into your bank service to check on some deposits or what have you, and your bank says, okay, we need to verify this is you. We're sending a text message right now. Would you get that text message? Probably not. Nope. And that's not necessarily, in my opinion, that's not necessarily a problem with the cell service or the SMS system. That's a problem with the bank using SMS. The bank should use something else like a one-time password system that allows you to get in for additional authentication. That's something else that people aren't really taking into consideration these days, because everything is done through SMS and messaging. I don't know about you, but if I ask someone to shoot me an email, people tend to look at me sideways like, what the heck is an email? Because I hardly ever give out my number. I just don't, because I don't want to get random text messages. I'd rather let email do its thing and filter spam and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on that particular procedure with merchants and banks and whatnot, just trying to authenticate you through SMS?
I mean, that's the big thing here is, and that's kind of what the Vice piece was writing about, is that, hey, this is something that is potentially dangerous because of the way that some services work to be able to reset passwords through text messages and things like that. So in that way, this is even more concerning than me just not receiving text messages from a person who I, haven't spoken to. The chat points out, it was going to be the next thing that I was going to mention, that this kind of service has been around, or this kind of service, this kind of flaw has been around for a while. It was back in 2018 when Lucky225 had originally been aware of it. However,
oh my goodness.
It was kind of the idea that, hey, even though Lucky225 had been aware of it back in 2018 and had kind of said some things about it, it wasn't widely known. And then about 3 days ago, Lucky225 wrote an article on Medium that then led to the Vice motherboard piece with Joseph Cox to kind of bring this to the forefront, to make this more known. So the reason why I wanted to bring up the piece that the chat room linked is because at the same time as this is a really important story, it also is a tiny bit some advertising for a company, and that is because Lucky225, the hacker, is the director of information at a place called Oki Systems. And the reason I want to bring that up is because Oki Systems is specifically designed to prevent this kind of thing. So a lot of times different folks in the technology realm will bring up kind of concerning things, and you go, but what do you do to fix it? And sometimes we have fixes, sometimes we don't. Lucky225, working for Oki Systems, does have a way to deal with this. And basically this is not me advocating for this service at all, but I thought it was interesting to talk about. You sign up for this service, and it will basically watch your number, and it goes into that background of how this all works. It's a very complicated thing. And so even the Vice motherboard piece does not go into the nitty-gritty detail of the tech behind everything, but the Medium article from Lucky225 that's linked from the Vice piece does. And essentially, it's all because of the way that that phone numbers work in relation to other places. So internationally, trying to tie a specific phone number to a specific person versus at the national level with your specific carriers, it's all different. And so there's a company called NetNumber, and NetNumber has a 6-digit code that kind of identifies the carrier that needs to route that number. And so just think of it like this. There are lots of different gatekeepers that exist in the SMS system and in the voice over IP system and in all of these different systems. And you kind of, whenever you send a message, depending on where you send it to, it goes through all of these different places and has to be recognized as coming from you, or as opposed to coming from someone else, as opposed to being globally, internationally from somebody else. And all these systems in place all are kind of using everybody else's technology to make it happen. So it's all just a mess, and you find this one way to wrap the message that's being sent in a different code, and then suddenly you're getting those text messages from somebody else. So I think it's because of the fact that the system in the background is very messy and is kind of glommed together that it's resulted in this being the case. But the Oki Systems, what it does is it looks at that background system and monitors it. And then even though, Sakari does not let you know. Thank you. Sakari doesn't let you know that your number has been changed. This will. It watches that to see if it's been changed. So, yeah, even when Cox was asking for information about how this happens, Sakari said, well, we do this through a company, another company, and then they contacted that company, and that company said, oh, well, we do this through this company. And then that company said, oh, well, we do that specific thing through this. And so it all just kept going to every other thing down the line.
To B.
Exactly. So it's hard to figure out kind of what's going on there and who ended up being at the root of it. So I don't know. Ultimately, I think that this is a really important piece, and folks should be. I've been pretty outside of I try not to show it on video or anything like that, but outside of even that, I've been pretty free with my number in the past because it was not like I never use SMS as my two-factor if I can help it. And so there are only a few cases, and SIM jacking is a lot more involved, and so I felt pretty safe there. I've got protections in place with AT&T that go a little bit farther than the normal thing, and so I kind of felt pretty A-okay with that until now. And so I think people should be aware that you kind of do need to be more protective of your number if you're not, because of these systems.
I wonder what else we can do as technologists and tech commentators to help spread the word about better 2FA practices and to get rid of the whole SMS aspect of it. Because I try to discuss it here in the Pruitt household of password security as well as 2FA. And yeah, I still get those sideways looks like, oh man, will you please shut up and just let me log in the way I want to log in. But I really don't know what else that we can do to help, spread the word and get people to understand the severity of this. It's one of those things where I hate saying it, but sometimes it takes getting hit in the nose before you start to take things seriously. And if something happens to their account, then it might be too late,
And that's, you're absolutely right. That's the unfortunate thing about it is if you don't have a deep understanding of both the problem, the risk that you have, as well as the technology that you can use to help you mitigate that risk, then it's often the case that you don't have the activation energy required to make that happen. And so
I like that activation energy.
You can tell someone that here is what could happen if your password gets hacked, and they could feel that viscerally. But then whenever you show them what they need to do to mitigate that risk, then suddenly those two things start to balance out. Or maybe they feel like it's very little, they're not really pulled into the whole idea that it's a risk, but they feel like a password manager would actually just be a cool system to have or whatever. So, you know what I mean? Like, regardless, you have to get them to feel both of those things, to know and understand the risk and feel that it is a very critical thing, and then also know and understand a password manager or whatever system you're using enough to want to use that thing regularly. And if we can make the risk mitigation easier for folks, then you don't have to do as much of the convincing them of how risky it is, because that balance kind of is struck. And so for my partner, he's not a technologist at all, and kind of despises some technologies in certain ways. And I was able to finally get him using the password manager that's built into iOS, because it actually ended up being easier for him. Because what was his password before? It was that forgot password button that you hit every single friggin' time because he could never remember the password. So basically just going to the email where you choose to click here to reset your password. That was his login every single time. And
that's pretty
finally,
secure.
Right. So finally he kind of got tired of having to do that over and over again. And it turned out that having his phone and iPad and stuff just remember his password for him was a lot faster than doing that email thing, and was a lot less frustration. So that ended up balancing out where suddenly it wasn't so much work. But you are right that I think in some cases it really does take kind of the bad thing happening to be enough to strike that activation energy. And that's no good, as you say, because oftentimes then it's too late. But yeah, I think we'll all keep pondering on what's the right thing to do and how you convince people to take advantage. But ultimately, I think the best thing is to make that stuff as easy as possible to use and as difficult as possible to exploit. And that's an ongoing struggle. Alrighty, folks. Up next, we have Aunt Pruitt's story of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Conga. Are you ready to evolve operations, streamline workflows, and create and deliver digital documents, quotes, and contracts more effectively? Of course you are, and you can with Conga. Conga helps businesses digitally transform their commercial operations. Other companies may be stepping away from opportunities like this, but Conga believes this is the perfect time to keep moving forward. The manual processes that were once conducted in person and in office came to an abrupt halt when the pandemic hit and businesses found themselves limiting contact and working from home. We'll all head back to our offices eventually, but the need for digital transformation has catapulted from an aspiration to a non-negotiable requirement. Conga offers the most robust solution for digital document, process, and commercial excellence transformation. Its end-to-end digital document transformation suite can help you automate and optimize your daily documents and contracts to save time, close business faster, and empower your teams to work with more purpose. Conga Composer, which allows you to power up customer engagement, lets you create digital documents from Salesforce with quick and error-free solutions every single time. You can create beautiful templated documents directly from Salesforce, automate your templated documents so they'll always be built with the right data. Documents will be accurate then, and you can pull data directly from your CRM or any system of record with no errors. Deliver documents in a variety of formats by almost any method and store where you want. There are also advanced features for Composer Enterprise. You can get real-time document notifications that reveal recipient engagement and then make follow-up super simple. With Conga Batch, you can consolidate, schedule, and deliver the documents that you create with Composer. Choose how you want to launch and send, whether automatically or on demand, and even do so for multiple documents at once. Composer's add-on, Conga Trigger, will let you create and distribute digital documents automatically from Composer and Salesforce without having to click a stinking button every time. T-Mobile for Business saved time and money using Conga. T-Mobile's sales reps didn't have the necessary key capability in their sales proposals. Their customers couldn't see the proposals in writing, or they had to create additional documents that were time-consuming and caused errors. With Conga Composer, T-Mobile's sales promotions have never been clearer, easier, or more beautiful. What once took 24 to 48 hours to file a case and request a ticket is now an instant report. Sales teams now avoid multiple systems, and T-Mobile has seen a 25% increase in user adoption. They are getting paid faster, and that's what you want, to get paid as quickly as possible. Conga is committed to improving how people do business at a much larger scale with additional resources. They know we're all in this together, so experience Conga's new brand and have some fun at conga.com/twit. Test your knowledge of trivia and share on social. Conga will take the results and donate it to a charity that's supporting COVID relief efforts. That's conga.com/twit. Thanks so much to Conga for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Aunt Pruitt, what is your story of the week?
Well, there are some things that are pretty much just guaranteed for life, right? We're going to have a new iPhone every year, and we're going to have a new Samsung Galaxy phone every year. We're going to have a new Samsung Galaxy Note phone every year. Well, maybe not. Sam Bifford and The Verge have reported that Samsung is potentially going to cancel the Galaxy Note phone this year. And it's been raising a lot of questions, partly because of the semiconductor shortage that has been brought upon us because of the global COVID-19 pandemic. This has been something that's a lot of the fans out there are going to be a bit upset, but I have to beg the question. Why does this matter? Because over the last couple of years, Mr. Sargent, the Samsung Galaxy line of phones have been pretty much looking and performing like the Galaxy Note of old. The screens have gotten larger. The cameras have gotten just as nice. The processing prowess has been just as good, if not better. And yet they would still go ahead and put out the Note. Oh, and one more thing. the Galaxy line also had a stylus input that you could use on them instead of having to depend on the Galaxy Note. So my question to everybody out there that's on the Galaxy Note fan base, what are your thoughts? Why does this matter to you? Why not just go ahead and stick to the Galaxy line of phones and remove the Note moniker on there? I personally have not been a Samsung user, but I do respect their hardware and the build quality that they've been putting into these phones these last couple of years. But I did think that having both the Galaxy line, where it's the S Ultra, S Ultra Pro, as however many different names they had, versus having the Galaxy Note was a bit redundant and didn't quite make any sense to me. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Sargent? Because I know you're an iOS person, but I also know that you're fairly agnostic and just, hey, whatever the tech is, it is what it is. And I've even seen you use a Windows device here and there.
Yeah. I'm always for, lots of different companies making lots of different cool devices for the sake of having choice out there for people. And the Note, I think, has been a really popular phone for people in the past, and particularly with the little stylus. For some people, that was a big thing. What's the S Pen?
S Pen, right? That's it.
Yeah, and so I think that launching 2 flagships in a single year is kind of a big deal. That takes a lot of work. I mean, Apple notoriously does a flagship launch one year, and then the next year they do an iteration on last year's model, and then the following year they, introduce a new one. Of course, it depends, because sometimes they don't do that. But for the most part, it's like you get the 4, then you get the 4S, you get the 5, then you get the 5S, and you get the 6. And even then, it's still kind of hard to figure out how to improve upon a technology or change things in such a way that suddenly it's worth, buying the new thing. So to do 2 flagship phones in 1 year is incredibly difficult, I'm sure. And I have to say that I've talked about this before. I think that I doubt that Samsung cares about this, but for me, I do care about this, which is the sort of social responsibility of not releasing 2 flagship phones in 1 year. Let me talk about why I feel that that's the case. So it's a psychological thing, and you may have noticed it surrounding you. Certainly, I've noticed it surrounding me, which is that anytime a person loses some form of control in their life, particularly related to some form of trauma, then they will look for ways, just kind of at their base instincts, to reinstate control in their life. And this can manifest in small ways or big ways. The classic example is the person having the midlife crisis. They feel like they are coming to the end of their life, and they don't have any say over their body continuing to age. And so they go and they buy a boat, or they buy, some expensive car, and that helps them feel like they are in control. They made this choice. They have this thing. They did this thing, and they can go out and do what they want with it. But it manifests in small ways too. And with all of us experiencing a low-grade trauma, and in some cases high-grade trauma due to the pandemic, we all are looking for ways to add control back to our lives. So you'll notice more people dyeing or bleaching their hair during the pandemic, getting different types of haircuts. I have seen quite a few people get tattoos during the pandemic, more so than they would at other times. All of these are ways to say, I am in control of this flesh bag, and I am in control of my place in the world, and therefore, I can do this or I can do that. Leo buying a gaming computer, which he's talked about on Windows Weekly and MacBreak Weekly. I think that's a little bit of being in control. And so because of that, one way that we do try to reclaim control is through purchasing. And I was very hesitant. Like in years past, I would typically get very excited about a new iPhone. And when I looked at the, this latest phone in comparison to the phone of a year ago, it already didn't feel like it was that much of a jump. But it also, to me, felt like I would normally go, okay, even though it's not that much of a jump, here are the things that are pretty cool about it. Here are the things that you can get excited about. But I chose to be a little less focused on all of the new things and say, instead, if you need this, then you can, go for the 3 cameras, or if you need that, then you would add this feature. This, phone would add this feature or what have you. But ultimately, it's not enough of a jump to get the next thing. And that is because people might feel inclined to spend money that they may not need to spend or have to spend to have the latest phone, because they are more susceptible to wanting to regain control. And so again, I don't think Samsung is thinking of that, but to not have that, another flagship device out there that folks will excitedly try to purchase is, I think, a positive thing overall. Because now, if they do continue the line in the future, perhaps, then it means that they can iterate even more. The chip production issues because of the pandemic, that means that, that could get better. It also means that all the people that are in the lineup that create this product are not being pushed even harder to make sure that this flagship device is put out during the pandemic. And so there's just a lot of social good that I think ends up being done because of a decision like this. So I don't blast them at all for choosing to wait on announcing 2 flagship devices.
What gets me with this is these phones are designed and developed over years before we see them. The latest iPhone that you have in your hands, they didn't just put that together last year. It's been a couple of years of work and research. And I'm looking at Samsung taking a lot of those features from the Note and putting it into the S line of things. They thought about this a long time ago. So I wonder if they were just eventually going to say, you know what, we're probably going to kill the Note off anyway, but having this semiconductor crisis right now is just an easy out for them. Thoughts?
Interesting. Yeah, I guess we'll see based on if Samsung does a Note
decide
in the
to kill
coming
it
years. Off. Yeah, right. But that would be an interesting thing. It makes me wonder, because I don't think that if Samsung had said, hey, we're done with the Note, I don't know that would suddenly cause customers to stop buying Samsung devices. So I don't know about the blowback there, like what that would result in. But certainly it would help them, if they were planning on doing that anyway. Or maybe it's one of those things where you've got this project that you just need to get done, but you're just kind of begrudgingly doing it. So that could have been helpful there, where they're like, okay, we can say this, and now I don't have to spend my nights working on this thing I don't want to work on right now anyway.
Somebody get PR on the phone, stat.
Yeah, exactly.
But then there's also the other line of phones, the Fold. That's some interesting technology that's continuing to see a little bit of updates over the last couple of years in performance and build quality, and maybe that's allowing them to free up resources to put more into that product and bring a little bit more innovation to this stale cell phone field that's out there. Because quite frankly, I am pretty bummed about most cell phones nowadays. They just don't do anything for me anymore. About like how you were saying, it really didn't excite you. And I've been that way for several years now. Just, here's another flat rectangular piece of glass that makes phone calls and allows me to jump on social media and tweet. Same way this other phone did too. It just, I don't know, but that's me. Again, I'm sorry for coming on this week and sounding like a Luddite. Sorry.
No, it's a refreshing take. Just again, if it's not there, then don't try to force it for this technology, and frankly, in everything. So yeah, it's fine that this may not be the year for the Note, and I guess we'll see going forward if there is.
All right. Well, folks, that's going to do it for this week. Tech News Weekly publishes each and every Thursday here on twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go and subscribe to the show and also check out all of our different formats, whether it's video and audio, the YouTube channel. Heck, you can even go and click on the iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave us a review.
That would be awesome. You should also follow us on social media. We are at TWiT on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at TWiT Talk on TikTok, and I am at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks. Later today, I'll be recording and streaming Smart Tech Today with Matthew Casanelli, and tomorrow, Rosemary Orchard and I will be doing iOS Today, so you can check out those shows as well. And Aunt Pruitt, where do people find you online, and where do they go to find your show?
All right. Well, you can find me on the Twitterverse and Instagram at ant_Pruitt. And actually, you can go and check out my show, Hands On Photography. That's twit.tv/hop.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much to the folks in the studio that are working for us to make this show great. Of course, we've got John Ashley on the keys. Is that's like a guitar? I don't know.
That was a guitar. It wasn't keys.
Yeah, and Burke in the studio as well, and everybody else who makes this show possibility every single week. Until then, we will see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands On Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.